The Declaration of Independence is one of the most influential documents of all time. But do the words still matter today?
I think they're more important today, perhaps more than ever.
We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal.
All men were not created equal when this country was founded. That's why slavery was a thing.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
You got to pursue it. It just doesn't happen automatically.
The Declaration of Independence is about a group of people who say our world is not working and we're going to change it.
I'm Doug Ginsburg, a judge on the Federal Court of Appeals. Join me on a journey to discover the enduring legacy of our founding document.
We hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
That they are endowed by their Creator
with certain unalienable rights.
That among these are life,
liberty,
and the pursuit of happiness.
That to secure these rights,
governments are instituted among men,
deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
That whenever any form of government
becomes destructive of these ends,
it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it.
And to institute new governments.
Laying its foundation on such principles
and organizing its powers in such form
as to them shall seem most likely
to affect their safety and happiness.
The whole of political philosophy is in that sentence. The most compact definition of democracy is in that sentence. The clearest account of the rights and responsibilities of citizens is in that sentence. That's all we need.
The Declaration was written by committee, but the chief author was a 33-year-old lawyer and plantation owner, Thomas Jefferson.
The New York Public Library holds Thomas Jefferson's draft of the Declaration of Independence.
It lets people see just how much change and revision and argument went into the process. The document didn't just sort of spring in its final form from one person's head.
Danielle Allen is a Harvard University professor and author of the book, Our Declaration.
It's really important that the Declaration was written by committee. Democratic writing means that you really push and pull to find answers, even to divisive questions that can bring people together. The Declaration is our inheritance. It is something that earlier generations created to name their goal, their purpose. Their purpose was self-government, institutions resting on the consent of the governed that could deliver the safety and happiness of all the people. As such, it's the best starting point and guide we have for what it means to be democratic citizens.
In 1775, few colonists wanted independence from Britain. Even after blood was shed at Lexington and Concord.
The founders would never have declared independence without, as the Declaration put it, the consent of the governed, or at least enough of them.
In the 1700s, there was no social media, no TV, no radio. People got their information from newspapers, posters, and pamphlets.
Print media definitely turns the tide of the revolution.
Emily Sneff is an historian of the Declaration of Independence.
In January of 1776, an anonymous 47-page pamphlet appears in Philadelphia, urging a radical idea: independence.
The author is a grammar school dropout from a small town in England, a former tax collector, and a failure at most jobs he tried. Thomas Paine.
He gets a letter of introduction from Ben Franklin and sails for Philadelphia. So he arrives here as someone very interested in what's happening in the colonies.
He writes a pamphlet with the straightforward title, Common Sense.
All of a sudden, common sense is shorthand for support of independence.
Common Sense goes viral. In a matter of months, printers sell tens of thousands of copies. The Continental Congress declares independence, and a rebellion becomes a revolution. Six months after the Declaration, a free black man in Boston named Prince Hall decides to take the founders at their word. that all men are created equal.
And he took the Declaration of Independence and grabbed a lot of its words and rewrote it to submit a petition arguing for the abolition of enslavement. So it's important that that vocabulary of equality in the Declaration is recognized as helping to crystallize and launch the abolitionist movement.
Massachusetts denied Hall's petition, but not for long. In 1780, Pennsylvania abolished slavery, and Massachusetts followed suit 3 years later.
From then on, groups would use the Declaration to support the fight for the abolition of slavery, civil rights, and women's independence. In the mid-19th century, women started working outside the home in factories like this. They were paid less than men, and they turned their wages over to their husbands. Women were, in every sense, second-class citizens. They couldn't buy land, they couldn't sign a contract, and they couldn't vote.
We have life so easy, right? We go flip on the light switch, turn on the water, we flush a toilet. Even the simplest of things were difficult for them.
For 2 days in July 1848, 300 people, mostly locals, mostly women, and mostly Quakers, held America's first convention for women's rights, right here.
When we look at the Women's Rights Convention, we look at the larger movements that are going on: abolition, temperance, the labor movement.
Janine Waller is the chief of interpretation at the Women's Rights National Historical Park.
At this point, after the revolution, everyone is really trying to figure out, what does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to be a citizen?
The women of Seneca Falls rewrote the Declaration to include women and to express their grievances using the founders' own words.
They really wanted to find something that would speak to the soul of the nation, and there was nothing stronger than the Declaration of Independence. It was familiar, and it has one of the most famous beginnings, right? We hold these truths
To be self-evident that all men
are created equal. Well, the obvious omission there is that all men and women.
that all men and women
are created equal.
The convention adopted 9 resolutions, the most controversial of which was to grant women the vote.
I can't vote a woman into office until I can vote. Once I can vote, I can run for office. Every time I see first woman, it makes me angry that somebody had to punch through that barrier.
As women fought for equality, Black Americans fought against slavery, led by the only African American to attend the Seneca Falls Convention, Frederick Douglass. Abolition became the next crusade for freedom, and Douglass became its voice.
Although denied a formal education, he was to become one of the greatest orators in American history. As a young man, Douglass worked in the port of Baltimore as a skilled caulker and shipbuilder. In 1838, at the age of 20, he borrowed identification papers from a free black sailor and fled to freedom via the Underground Railroad.
The Founding Fathers had good intentions, but again, when this country declared the Declaration of Independence, there was still slavery.
4 years after attending the Women's Convention in Seneca Falls, Douglass gave a landmark speech calling out the hypocrisy in the Declaration of Independence.
What to the American slave is your 4th of July? What have I, or those I represent, to do with your national independence? Are the great principles of political freedom and natural justice embodied in the Declaration of Independence extended to us? I didn't understand it emotionally when I read it, and we didn't have liberty and freedom and the pursuit of happiness at the time.
Slavery would tear America apart. Nine years after Douglass's speech, America plunged into civil war.
In the second year of the war, Lincoln strikes a blow for freedom by issuing an executive order that would free 3 million slaves. Today, we know that order as the Emancipation Proclamation.
He famously said, "As I would not be a slave, so I would not be a master." That is the only definition of democracy I know, and anything that varies from that to any degree is not democracy.
In the third year of the war, he delivers one of the greatest speeches in our history, the Gettysburg Address.
77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
Which is true. We're all created equal. You cut me, I bleed red. Cut you, you bleed red.
No matter height, weight, race, sex, gender, we're all created equal.
The Civil War ended slavery, but didn't bring equality. Many states enacted so-called Jim Crow laws, the term for legally enforced segregation of blacks from whites.
100 years ago, maybe even 50 years ago, there's a very high likelihood I wouldn't just be walking and have somebody stop me for an interview, more specifically, an older white man.
If you're free as a citizen, you can have that freedom only if you have equality with the other citizens. So freedom and equality have always belonged together.
The equality promised in the Declaration was denied to most black Americans because of legalized discrimination in housing and schooling, employment and voting.
In a landmark decision in 1954, the Supreme Court prohibited segregation in public schools. Yet 10 years later, a civil rights bill to safeguard the liberties of black Americans was stalled in Congress. To rally support for the bill, black leaders in 1963 organized a March on Washington for jobs and freedom. Among the speakers was civil rights leader Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Martin Luther King stood over there in front of the Lincoln Memorial and gave a speech that rivals the Gettysburg Address in its eloquence.
Dr. King reminded his fellow Americans of their shared birthright, the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. A sacred pledge that he likened to a promissory note long past due.
When Dr. King said it's a promissory note, eventually we will get to what the Declaration of Independence actually should have meant when the Founding Fathers said it, right?
Dr. King believed in America's enduring ability to redeem itself.
He said he dreamt of the time when his children would be judged, not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Every 4th of July, we celebrate our independence. But do we appreciate our Declaration of Independence?
I think there's a need for us to recenter and get grounded again with what our founding fathers meant us to go by, and I think the Declaration certainly provides that for us.
The story of democracy is to bring more people in and to make more people a part of it.
I feel like our generations and next generations will at least try to make the world a better place.
It gives us a holiday that really is for everybody.
I'm still hopeful that we'll get to that utopian idea that our Founding Fathers had in mind, right?